forest is silent, the river's running low, and the flame on our plates is the strongest fire we throw. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. 7 boundaries broken, the earth pushed past the line. Climate, land, species, fresh water, chemicals, nutrients, oceans in decline. Not danger, disaster in real time. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Metafoodians rise, this is your power. And here in India, one truth stands the same. Milk is not just milk, dairy feeds the flame. Cows and methane, fields and forests turn to grain. Politics, culture, carbon, all wired to the same chain. Every cup of curd is heat in the air, every block of butter is a forest repair. It's not a small habit, it's a planetary affair. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is our hour. Energy fixes half the hurt, Dr. Rao made that clear. But food fixes the other half, the half that's burning here. Change the plate, change the land, change the future's atmosphere. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Metafoodians unite, this is your choir. Every millet, every fruit, every sapseed, every bean is water on the wildfire of a world we've never seen. Every oil-free bite is a river turning clean. This is not perfection, it's direction. Not pressure, but protection. A week of choices can cool a generation. A company's courage can ignite a nation. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. Metafoodians unite, Metafoodians ignite, sharing love in the metazone, lighting the path to a cooler home. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Together we rise, together we inspire.
Welcome to the Planet B podcast, where truth, transformation, and faith converge. Join us as we flip the script on ecological despair, guided by Dr. Sailesh Rao's vision for a compassionate, rewilded vegan world. Let's begin the journey to the greatest transformation in human history.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the Planet B podcast. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into the animal agriculture position paper. Dr. Rao, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. It's been, we are halfway through, and it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, it's been great. I've learned so much. I hope that our audience has as well. And today is really getting into like the nuts and bolts of where all of the data behind this new Planet B system has come from. So, Dr. Rao, if you don't mind, let's begin with your opening quote for chapter 16.
Yeah, it's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi saying, even if you're a minority of one, the truth is the truth. And I remember, this paper came about because Jane Wells Mitchell asked me to write it. Uh, she she asked me to write it in 2019, and I had all the information already and processed in my mind, and I just had to put it all down because I had been analyzing the data in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, fifth assessment report. So that's what the paper was based on. And once I finished writing it, I had this number 87%. And Jane said, "Oh, that seems too high." And is there a range? You should put a range on this. And I said, well, if you want a range, I can say it's at least 87%. That's all I can do because it's greater than that. Because I started off with Goodland and Annang's paper, which had at least 51%. And to that, I added opportunity cost, and that's how I came up with 87%. So it is, in that sense, minority position because no one was in that range. Everyone was talking about 14%, 18%, and the IPCC had said 24%, but the IPCC was calculating based on a different criteria. So I say there are two questions about animal agriculture or any sector. First question is, how much is that sector contributing to annual emissions? So that's the first question A. And question B is, how much is that sector contributing to the heating that you are experiencing today? That's question B.
Right.
And so people get confused between these two questions, because some estimates are for question A and some estimates are for question B.
Right.
And the position paper was about question A, which is how much of the annual emissions today are caused by the animal agriculture sector. And I use an engineer's approach for calculating these, in which opportunity costs are automatically included. And opportunity cost is what would happen if you didn't have that sector and the resources of that sector were used for restoring or reducing the emissions. And when we do opportunity cost analysis in engineering, we assume that resource is being redeployed with reasonable effort.
Right.
Okay. And the main resource that gets freed up when we eliminate animal agriculture is the land that is being used for raising animals. And that is the number one use of land today,
Right.
among human activities. And therefore, that land has the potential to store an enormous amount of carbon on an annual basis. So that's what I was calculating as the opportunity cost. And I assume that if you were to use reasonable effort to bring back the forests, we should be able to sequester at least as much carbon as the animals are eating today.
Yeah, so I want to just write. So you made a statement on that in the book, and I'm just going to read it if you don't mind.
Sure.
It says, in the position paper, the opportunity cost of the land used for animal husbandry was calculated assuming that nature is able to sequester at least as much CO2 as that embedded in all the food that our farmed animals are consuming today when we are consciously restoring the ecosystems of the planet.
Correct. Yeah. The assumption is that animals don't eat underground, right? Our farmed animals. At least
Yeah.
last time I checked, they were all eating above ground vegetation. And the amount of food that they're eating has been calculated. So we have an estimate for that. And the food that animals are eating is basically hydrocarbon. Half of that food, roughly, is the carbon in the food. Okay, so you can then calculate how much carbon is there in the food that the animals are eating. And then from that carbon, you can translate it to carbon dioxide. How much carbon dioxide did the plant sequester to make that food? Okay. Now, when we are calculating opportunity cost, we are calculating how much CO2 is sequestered in regenerating forests, where no one is eating that and sending it back up because the animals are not there. Right? And so we assume that the forests are able to do as much as the plants are already doing today that the animals are eating. Okay.
All right.
We should be able to do more than that. Surely, because we have the wherewithal to help plants grow faster, right? So whatever it is, I mean, we don't have to grow grass. We can grow trees instead. I assume that we should be able to do at least as much as what the animals are eating. And then you calculate, once you calculate how much CO2 is there in the food that the animals are eating, and assume that that's happening above ground, then the same amount or double will be sequestered below ground.
In the root systems, correct?
The same amount will be sequestered in the root systems, plus the same amount will be sequestered in the soil. So that makes it double.
Ah, wow. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot.
So it basically gets roughly tripled, right? On average, over time, it'll get tripled. So I say we have to calculate that, then that will be the opportunity cost. That's what we are missing every time we eat animals. So every time we eat animals, we are making the choice that we do not want that sequestration to happen. We'd rather eat the animals instead. That's a huge component, which is not there in the fossil fuel industry, because fossil fuels don't sequester anything. You're digging from underground and you're burning it, right?
So if you don't mind, I'd just like to go back then to a statement you made right at the beginning where you said foundational myth on planet A, fossil fuel use is the leading cause of climate change. And then foundational truth on planet B, animal husbandry is the leading cause of climate change, while stopping fossil fuel use is now suicidal. So
Correct.
We've talked a little bit about that, but just please revisit that once again, because it's just so important.
Yeah, stopping fossil fuel use now is immediately is suicidal. You have to do it gradually. Which, by the way, when the fossil fuel activists are calling for reduction in fossil fuels or elimination of fossil fuels, people are talking about 30-year time frame or 20-year time frame to reduce fossil fuel use to zero, right? Which, by my calculations, are the optimum time frame. Okay, so meaning they should continue their activity. What they're doing is fine, and they should, hold people's feet to the fire to reduce fossil fuel use over time, over the next 20-30 years. But you have to go vegan as quickly as possible. You have to restore the ecosystems of the planet as quickly as possible. And that is what is missing in the discourse when you miscalculate the true contribution of animal agriculture. Okay? Not only to emissions, but also to the warming that we are experiencing on the planet today. And so Jared Bishop's work has to do with the warming that the planet is experiencing today, whereas my position paper was about the emissions that are happening as of 2009, because the data was not updated since then. Okay, so I don't know. The FAO's data, I don't trust it at all.
And why is that? Why don't you trust that data?
Because the FAO's data, the original data they did in 2006 in the Livestock's Long Shadow report, and Goodland and Anhang took that report and they fixed it and they updated the data that was there. But their report came out in 2009. Okay. Then the FAO and Goodland and Anhang had a debate about that paper, and the FAO then went and formed a partnership with the livestock industry. So they have formed a partnership with the International Meat Secretariat, International Dairy Federation, the International Poultry Council, and the International Egg Commission. These were the 5 founding members of the Livestock Environmental Assessment and Performance Partnership, the LEAP partnership. So the 5 founding members were the UNFAO and these 4 industry organizations. Okay.
Dr. Rao, that seems like those could tip the numbers just slightly.
Yeah. So then they revised their 2006 paper and they reduced the numbers, even though
Oh,
Goodland and
gee.
Hanang had said it is actually greater. Okay. Goodland and Hanang had found all kinds of emissions that they did not count in the FAO report. So then the FAO went and revised it down. So they're saying, yeah, the debate happened about Goodland and Hanang's paper and we lost the debate. In fact, the editor of the journal invited the FAO scientists to continue the debate and they declined to continue the debate. Basically, they lost the debate. Okay. After losing the debate, they deliberately went and reduced it. And then they're updating that. And I'm saying, oh, how would I believe anything that comes out of the FAO now? You know, because it is completely in the hands of industry. So my estimate was based on 2009 numbers that Goodland and Hanang had fixed from the FAO. Now, I don't have the original data. Goodland and Hanang were part of the World Bank. Okay, so they have access to this data. And then they got suppressed. I mean, Goodland was already outside the World Bank. So he had just retired from the World Bank. But he was a high-ranking official at the World Bank, so he had access to some of that data. And Hanang, he still works for the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank group. So he has access to the data, but he has told me that he was not going to do any more work on this. He's been told he cannot do any more work on this.
He's been silenced.
Absolutely. Okay. So my data is valid as of 2009. That's it. I haven't updated it. This is why I used human population numbers from 2009. I used everything from 2009 in my calculations.
Right.
Because I need to be consistent. If I start with 2009 data, I cannot mix it with 2019 data. So I used population numbers from 2009. I used food production estimates from the IPCC, which was, I think, based on earlier than 2009. So it's at least, this is why I said it's at least 87%.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the stronger figure in a minute. But so in terms of the this data manipulation, so in chapter 16, you stated that your approach differs from the UN IPCC's because the UN IPCC uses net accounting for land use change emissions, whereby emissions from land that get deforested is offset with regrowth on managed or abandoned land. Can you share a little bit about what that means?
So what the IPCC does is because they're trying to compare fossil fuel emissions, which they claim is new carbon that's being added to the atmosphere, and land use emissions. These are the 2 main sources of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. Now, when you deforest land and you burn the forests, when you burn the trees, they basically CO2 goes up into the air. Okay? And when you burn fossil fuels, CO2 goes up in the air. Now, as far as the atmosphere is concerned, it's just CO2. Everything is CO2 being burnt and sent up into the air. It then sequesters a whole bunch of that CO2 back on ground. So nature has this healing process, okay, of trying to undo the damage that we are doing. So when it sees a whole bunch of extra CO2 coming into the atmosphere, it tries to sequester it. It actually is bulking up the trees. How amazing is nature, right? She's bulking up the trees, making them grow faster. Okay.
Wow.
To sequester the excess CO2. Okay. So of all the emissions that we are doing, roughly 90%, 80 to 90% is being sequestered. Now, so only 10 to 20%, it's like somewhere around 15% is staying in the atmosphere. Okay. Now, what the IPCC does is that they want to play favorites for the animal agriculture industry. Why? Because animal agriculture is the precious industry. You cannot touch it. If you touch it, the entire thing collapses in the system on planet A.
Mm.
Okay. So how do you protect that industry? Fossil fuels, you can argue, if you change it over to solar panels, you're still continuing the same planet A system. You just change the fuel for the planet A system. Whereas if you eliminate animal agriculture, the planet A system collapses. And you have to create a new system that does not use animals at all, and that's planet B. So
Right.
if your motivation is to preserve planet A and continue the economic growth story, you want to pin the blame on fossil fuels. So how do you do that? This is where the accounting conventions come in. So they're saying ultimately we know only 10 to 15% stays up in the atmosphere. So who cares how it is accounted for? Right? So
Yeah.
you take the animal agriculture's emissions and you discount it. You discount it by saying, you chop down 100 million acres of forest, but here you abandon 70 million acres of land that becomes desert. Right? So you just say, I only deforested 30 million acres because I abandoned 70 million acres.
Hmm.
So that's how they're reducing how much is accounted for animal agriculture. So they're reducing it and then saying that we only emitted, less CO2 and the atmosphere is only holding 45% of that, not 15% of that. Because you lowered the numbers.
All right.
So the airborne fraction becomes 45% instead of 15%. Otherwise, the atmosphere, as far as the atmosphere is concerned, it only increased by so much, which you can measure, right? So you cannot lie there, because people are measuring the CO2. They know exactly how much is being added to the atmosphere every year. But how much are we emitting into the atmosphere? That you can fudge, because nature is
Right.
already compensating for it. And that's where the fudging is happening. That's only one of the fudging that happens in the IPCC's accounting. The IPCC's accounting conventions for reporting to policymakers. These conventions are, as far as the climate scientists are concerned, they're looking at only how much CO2 got added to the atmosphere. They don't care about this cycle, right?
Hmm.
This cycle is much, much bigger than the amount that's added to the atmosphere every year. Okay, there's a lot more CO2 because it's part of the respiration cycle. We are breathing out CO2. Human beings, animals are breathing out CO2. Vegetation is also decaying and putting CO2 into the atmosphere. And then CO2 through photosynthesis is being sequestered in plants. So and plants die out every year. There are trees that drop their leaves every year. There is a huge carbon cycle.
Right.
Okay, that's separate from what we are doing as human beings. So we are just, we thought we are just adding a minor thing on the side, but it turns out it's accumulating in the atmosphere year after year after year, and it's having a big impact now. So to account for that impact, so they're trying to separate out the natural carbon cycle and then saying this is human contribution. But in the human contribution, they're putting their thumb on the scale on behalf of the animal agriculture industry in order to preserve planet A.
There's a cow in the room, Dr. Rao.
Yes, that's the cow in the room that we've been talking about it since 2019. Since that paper got, I published it on our website in 2019, and then we tried to get it published in peer-reviewed journals in European journals, and they all did not want to even review it. And then I submitted it to a journal in India. The editors had asked me to come and give the keynote address. Since they had asked me to give the keynote address based on the paper, they had read the paper.
Right.
Right? So I gave the keynote address to the Ecological Society, and then I asked them if you would like to print the paper. And they said, absolutely, we would love to print the paper. So they printed it as an invited paper because they'd already reviewed it. So that got published in 2021 in the Journal of Ecological Society. And then Gerard's paper got published in 2025 in February. He's doing the same analysis, but for the amount of heating that we are experiencing on the planet caused by human activities. And he pointed out that it's 53% of the heating that we're experiencing today is caused by the animal agriculture sector.
I wrote some things down that you put in this chapter, and so vegetation eaten by animals, that's not counted. Cut down and burnt forests, that's not counted. Desertification that's caused by the land that cows are grazing on and the food that the animals are eating, the desertification on that land, that's not accounted for. Bottom trawling of the ocean, I believe, that's not accounted for as well.
Right, yeah. A lot of things that are not accounted for because there is a healing process already happening, right? So ultimately, you just have to account for the extra that got added to the atmosphere. Where did that come from? Okay. And that's why they could fudge the rest. Okay. Because as far as the climate models are concerned, they're only concerned with how much got added. How much did the CO2 increase year by year in the atmosphere? But when you want to assign responsibility to sectors, you really have to look at every human activity. I'm claiming in this chapter and in my paper that humans have to take responsibility for all of our actions.
Right.
Okay. So you emit CO2 by burning forests, you're responsible for all the CO2 that you emitted when you burned down that forest. You do not get to take credit for photosynthesis. We didn't do it. Okay?
Can you go a little bit into detail with that? Because it's so important. Could you just share a little bit more detail with that statement, please?
Yeah. When we say, offset this emissions with the land we abandoned, okay, what are we saying? We are basically saying the nature will restore forests on that land that we abandoned, and we are going to preemptively take credit for it, even before nature did it.
That's so silly. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's really what's going on. It's to me, as from an engineering perspective, it is so absurd. I told people if anyone had done this to me when I was working on the internet, I would have thrown them out the window. So, because you're trying to ruin my work, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how to solve the problem, and this kind of accounting convention is trying to distract me, and tell me to look at something else, when the major issue is right there in front of my face, right? So we don't get to take credit for photosynthesis. That's something that we all have to agree on this. Okay, you don't get to take credit for photosynthesis. You're responsible for emissions. That's it. You're not responsible for the plant growing. We didn't do that. Nature did it. So I think we have to have humility, and then based on that, we need to figure out, okay, where can we reduce our emissions?
Yeah.
Right. And when you do that, you get to numbers that I'm coming up with.
So let's talk about the newest numbers. So you were at 87% based on data from 2009, and then now that the UN IPCC has put out a sixth assessment report that was issued in 2021, and now you've updated that 87% figure to 118%.
Right, yeah. Because in the fifth assessment report, they had a range for how much carbon is sequestered in soil, okay, compared to how much carbon is in the vegetation. Vegetation carbon we can measure, right? We can measure the weight of trees. There are good metrics for doing that, right? Whereas soil carbon was harder because it depends on the depth to which you go and so on. And so in the fifth assessment report, they had a range. And based on that range, I took the minimum of the range in order to come up with my lower bound. And I said the same amount of CO2 that is stored in the root systems will also be stored in the soil. So that means that I can take the above ground CO2 sequestration and triple it. I mean, you add one more for the roots and one more for the soil. Okay.
Right.
Now, in the sixth assessment report, they had better numbers for CO2 that's stored in the soil, and they said it's actually 2.4 times what's in above.
So it's
ground.
higher. It's higher than initially, yeah.
Yeah, it's higher. And so I said, well, I mean, and they didn't even give a number, a range. They just said it's the total is 3.4 times. I said, okay, if you're sure about that, I'm happy to take that number. And that 87% becomes 118% when you do that. Now, with the Gerard Bishop's estimate also, his estimate is 52% of the heating today is caused by animal agriculture. Okay. And he did not include the opportunity cost of the land. So meaning, if you eliminate animal agriculture overnight and you restore all of the forests that used to be there at equilibrium, okay, that's what the carbon opportunity cost would be for the cumulative estimate that he's doing. Because he's doing a cumulative estimate of all the emissions that happened over the last 200 years. Because
Right.
that's what's causing the heating today. Okay. So when you do opportunity cost now, you have to say, what would happen to the heating if he didn't have the animal agriculture industry? And that means you have to now look at all the land and return to forests at equilibrium. That's what it would be. And the estimate we're coming up is more than 118%. It's more like 130%.
Oh my goodness.
Because he did not include that opportunity cost. Because it was harder, So, yeah. The statement I'm making with 118% is that if we were to wave a magic wand and eliminate the animal agriculture industry overnight, okay, we will see the CO2 level in the atmosphere reduce year by year, even though we are still burning fossil fuels.
Right.
At the current rate. Okay. Why is that? Because the vegetation will sequester that. Whatever you're burning from fossil fuels, it will sequester that as well. Right?
Right.
And store it. Provided we are engaged in restoring the forests.
Right.
Okay. So it's a good news story. Okay. The good news is
Really
that,
good news.
yeah,
Really good
that
news.
You don't have to, eliminate the fossil fuel industry overnight. You can eliminate it slowly. And in the next chapter, I'll go into why you need to eliminate it slowly. You cannot do it right away.
Yeah.
That's the climate bathtub model thing. But but that's what that number is. And the other number, that 130% that we are saying about animal agriculture industries' contribution to heating today, what that means is that by eliminating animal agriculture and restoring the forests, we can bring back the temperature to what it was 200 years ago.
Right.
That's what that's saying. It's greater than 100%. You can bring it back. Okay.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But here's what will happen. As you bring it back to what was there 200 years ago, the CO2 levels in the atmosphere will come down. As the CO2 levels come down, the new trees that are born will not bulk up as much as the old trees who were born when the CO2 levels were much higher.
Mm.
Okay? So Meaning temporarily you can bring it down, but then as the old trees die out and new trees are born, you'll slowly reduce the amount of CO2 that's stored on land.
Wow.
So there will be some, there'll be some feedback loops that it's not there in the calculations that we are doing,
Yeah.
right? And eventually there'll be some equilibrium that we will reach, right? But the good news is that nature is telling us, look, I'm still capable of healing. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So it gives
So
me
beautiful.
tremendous faith that this is part of a larger process. I mean, these things we didn't know it was going to happen, right? We were just burning down forest. And nature,
Right.
we didn't expect nature to be bulking up the remaining trees to undo the damage that we have done. But that's what she's done.
Defending
Yeah.
herself, essentially.
Right, defending us from our own stupidity.
Yeah,
Well,
defending
our own
us, not
actions.
just. Yeah.
Yeah. But at some point she's going to quit, right? Because any system, if you keep stressing it, at some point she's going to say, I'm done. You know? And we don't want to get there, right? When systems collapse. But we are stressing the systems already. But so far, the systems are holding up.
Dr.
I mean,
towards the oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
no, I was saying, who would have expected that even though we cut down half the trees on the planet, the remaining trees would bulk up and store just as much carbon as all the other trees used to? Who would have
Right.
expected that, right? Now, will that last if you cut it down to just one last tree remaining? Of course it won't last. That tree is not going to store as much carbon as 3 trillion trees. Okay, no matter how how big you make that tree. So this is why at some point this process, this feedback process is going to stop. And that's what the planetary boundaries are telling us, saying we are stressing it already to to the red zone. And so we need to stop thinking that you can keep chopping down trees. You can keep reducing the number of trees on the planet, and the remaining trees will bulk up.
Right.
To take the heat, right? It's not going to do that. At some point, it's going to stop.
Yeah. So, Dr. Rao, what's in chapter 16, you mentioned that even when humanity goes vegan, which it will, humans will still need to intervene to help restore the original ecosystems.
Yeah.
What does that intervention look like to you?
Well, there are a lot of places where the deserts have taken over. Okay, so we have created this feedback loop that's desertifying the planet over and over, and you cannot expect the seeds that are in the ground to bloom when you don't have soil.
Right.
To help it bloom. So you have to there are a lot of places where you have to restore the soil first. Okay, so you have to create water retention structures because it's desertified, and then you have to plant trees. You have to basically maybe bring some soil from somewhere else and seed it, and then the plants that grow will drop their leaves and create more soil, over time. So it's that there are places where we have to intervene, and we already know that. Like, you cannot just abandon the Sahara and expect it to become a forest again.
Right.
Yeah, you have to intervene to turn the Sahara into a forest. And so there are a lot of places where humans need to intervene, but there are a lot of places where humans don't have to intervene, and they're usually the places where we just deforested. So there's a process that happens. You deforest, or you cut down a mangrove or whatever, and you remove the native ecosystem in a region. And then you plant grass for our cows to eat. Okay? Or so the way they do that is the grass is already growing there. There's already grass everywhere. And the cows are eating that. And whatever the cows don't eat, or whatever the cows and the goats and the sheep that we have on the land don't eat, we chop it every year. We chop those plants and we burn them. And this is known as pasture maintenance fires.
Hmm.
Okay, this is how we maintain pastures on Earth. Okay, and so when we burn that, we emit CO2. Okay, and the amount of land we burn to maintain pastures today is the area of India every
Wow.
year.
Every
Okay,
year.
every year. We burn an area the size of India every year to maintain pastures. Now, on that land, if you didn't have the animals, the forest will come back.
Right.
That's why you're chopping and burning.
Wow.
Right. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And now there are other places where we have deforested and then we have been pouring Roundup. This is the weed killer that kills anything that grows in the ground, except for the Roundup ready crops that we plant.
Right.
So converting forests into cropland is about growing GMO crops like that. That's what we do.
Yeah. So Dr. Rao, as we round up this, the final aspect of chapter 16, no pun intended, sadly, how do we get this message out? So this is, I think, the greatest message of our time, because number one, there is a solution, a very, very simple solution, and it's an exciting solution. It's easy to implement, and the data is all backing that now. So
Right.
your work, we from all of us who are in the movement, we really thank you for your work and your continued efforts to get the message out, because you've been doing this now for about 20 years, and now you're stronger than ever. So we thank you for that. But how, at this critical time, 2026, where we know 7 of 9 planetary boundaries have been transgressed, sadly, our planet is definitely not in the state that we want it to be in. How can we go out and spread this message as fast as we can?
You are doing it already. This is the way. We have to explain things so that people who are technical experts can understand, engineers can understand what I'm saying, and they can go verify my data and say, yeah, this is the way engineering is done. Okay,
Right.
I'm just doing my job as an engineer, as a
Yeah.
systems engineer, and I don't, any engineer will know that if you do shenanigans with the accounting like this, you're not going to build anything that actually works, and that is not the right way to account for things. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. You don't account like this. So I start with axioms, and so it's anyone can follow from first principles what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay? Any engineer, and so now we have to just spread the word. And these podcasts that we are doing, these episodes that we are doing, is the way to reach larger audiences. And then I'm going to go out and give more interviews and lectures and as much. I just say yes to everybody who asks me. That's my
Yes, I can validate that.
Yeah.
Dr. Rao, what about like us? Because we're not science specialists. We don't. Most of us don't have connections with engineers. We're out interfacing with the general public. We know that there's a very, very low percentage of vegans currently, fully vegans in the world. So when we go and share this message in the public, what is your advice for us?
Yeah, just say that, it's the leading cause is animal agriculture, and this engineer is standing by this. He's been standing by this for the last 7 years, and he's not backing down, and he's pointing out that the people who are telling you it is not the leading cause are also the same kind of people who are telling you that protein is only found in meat, calcium is only found in milk, which are lies. We know that. So it's the same kind of system that we are in. The system is all about how do I manipulate things in order to gain advantage for myself. That's the kind of system we have created. So,
Right.
yeah.
And then the other thing is if someone who's watching this podcast, they're maybe interfacing with a government official or a scientist or engineer, would you be open to a meeting with them or a conversation with them where they could potentially get in touch with you to connect you with this individual?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My email is there on my website, everything is there. So it's open source. Everything I do is open source. And so the book can be downloaded, the papers can be downloaded and read. And I'm happy to debate anybody. If anyone thinks there is something wrong with my paper, please tell me. Please tell me what it is, and I'll address it.
Awesome. So, Dr. Rao, any final message as we finish out episode 16?
Well, I go back to the initial quote. Even if you're a minority of one, the truth is the truth. So please shine the light on the truth.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for joining us. And coming up in episode 17 is the climate bathtub model, which really follows up on chapter 16. So we hope you all stay with us for our next episode 17. So thank you for joining us, and Planet B signing out.
This has been a podcast from Planet B, where plants aren't just side dishes. If you haven't moved here yet, we thank you for visiting.
Dr. Rao, we have a couple of questions in the chat from Michael. Do you see
Okay.
them? Or would you
Yeah.
like me to read them?
Go ahead and read them because I have to scroll up. Yeah.
Okay. The first one is stopping fossil fuel use now is suicidal if phased out now. For what reasons? Do you mean suicidal to industries being able to sustain the production expectations and level of demand / consumption of those living in the West, or actual result in deaths?
Well, actual result in deaths. Because what would happen if we were to wave a magic wand and eliminate fossil fuel use overnight, which of course is not going to happen, but I'm saying if you did that, and you replace, so you don't change anything, you replace all the energy infrastructure with clean energy sources like solar panels and wind power or whatever, and batteries. So I wave a magic wand and make this transformation happen overnight. Then within 2 to 3 weeks, the overall heating on the planet will increase by 50 to 90% within 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, because all the aerosols that get added to the atmosphere when we burn fossil fuels disappear in 2 to 3 weeks. They disappear with the next rain. And when those aerosols disappear, you lose the reflectivity over the in the atmosphere. So the reflectivity decreases, and the sun will shine more, on our heads and heat us up right away. Okay, so the heating will increase right away, but the impact of that will be felt in 2 to 3 years. So in 2 to 3 years, we should see like another half a degree Celsius increase in temperature, if not more. And that would trigger a lot of nonlinear feedback loops, and it's just go crazy after that.
Thank you. The next question is from Michael. Do you have estimates on what the rate of change of deforestation has been now compared to earlier decades in different parts of the world, and also the relative picture now / in recent years, which countries or continents deforestation is happening at how much a greater rate relative to other areas not deforesting so much?
Yeah, It's hard to tell. I mean, we can look at satellite pictures and deduce what's going on, but official figures are showing roughly the same or slight decrease over time. But that's official figures. Okay, remember the official figures do net calculations. So they take the gross emissions and then they um, subtract out abandoned land from that. So, uh, but mainly they're happening in South America, where there's a lot of forest still there, and in Indonesia. And there are not too many green places on the planet. And in the Congo, it's happening as well in Africa. Now, what happens with deforestation is that at some point, the ecosystem can then accelerate our own deforestation. So, meaning now the Amazon is burning. The Amazon never used to burn. Even if a lightning strike hit the Amazon, that wouldn't cause large fires. Why? Because it was a wet forest. It was a rainforest. But as you chop down the Amazon, at some point, it stops being a rainforest. It becomes drier and drier over time. And then it starts burning. And it's very troubling now that there are wildfires in the Amazon. And the Amazon is burning. Okay, which means we have crossed over that line. It's no longer a rainforest. So I say it's very important for us to now bring back the Amazon as quickly as possible and prevent this. Because once it starts burning, it could become a desert very quickly.
Thank you. And the third question from Michael is, can you talk about various large reforestation initiatives that have been very successful across the globe, and if you know how they reached those levels of impact? I know of Sadhguru's Covary Calling initiative that was part of his Rally for Rivers movement that began in 2019 that is said to have planted over 125 million trees to date,
Right.
but other worthwhile mentions. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, there are several like that have happened. The other one I know of, it's big at a big scale, is the Loess Plateau in China. But what happens is, China has been trying to green China, but they're outsourcing their destruction to other places. Because if you don't change your consumption, and this is the problem I have with Sadhguru's project as well, he hasn't asked people to go vegan. If you don't change your consumption and your tribe is growing, they're going to impact the destruction of forests somewhere else, right? And so China is basically outsourcing its destruction to South America, but they're greening within China. So this is why they have bought corporations in the West, to make the food for them, right? So they bought Smithfield, and all the pigs are being exported to China from here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's very, very important that we address the consumption part, because even if you're reforesting, it's a feel-good reforesting that you're doing, because you're deforesting much more somewhere else. Okay. So it has to be systematic. We have to address this systematically.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Thank you, Dr. Rao. I have a question about one of the things you're saying that's scientists are saying that they are responsible for photosynthesis. And I can't imagine a scientist saying, oh, I'm responsible for photosynthesis. So what words are they using? I mean, which chart is it? Yeah, would you explain that because you're saying it in a way that makes sense to you, but they're not going to be going around saying they've started photosynthesis or, You see what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah, hold on. I'll show you.
Okay,
So
thank you.
look at the IPCC carbon cycle. Let me see if I have that. Okay, there you go. So, I mean, I really think that reading block diagrams and understanding block diagrams is a very important skill that we all need to figure out. This should be as easy as reading a map.
Okay.
I mean, if we can read a subway map, we should be able to read this, okay? It's the same kind of skill. So if we look at this, everything in red is, according to the IPCC, human cost. Everything in gold is natural cost, nature cost. That's how they account it, okay? Now, the arrows represent the amount of carbon that's emitted from that source. So the ocean is on the right here, land is on the left. Okay. And you see volcanoes like 0.1, that's volcanoes. And so this, if you see this, so there is 111.4, 111.1, whatever, total respiration. That's in gold. That's natural. And then 111 coming down. Okay. 113 coming down. Yeah, that's natural cause. You see this red, 25.6 going up into the atmosphere, and then 29 coming down. Now, what are we saying when we put that in red? We are saying that we, human beings, caused this photosynthesis to happen. Did we?
Nope.
No, we just poured some chemicals, okay? and trees grew or plants grew because we poured those fertilizers. You may get to a situation where no matter what you pour on the ground, photosynthesis doesn't work anymore. Why? Because it's not us, it's not under our control, it's nature. Nature does photosynthesis. So I am demanding that all these downward arrows should be gold colored over the ocean and over the land. It should be gold colored, and we have to account for all the red emissions. Who did that? Which industry did that? So there's an additional 48.6 gigatons that you have to account for when you do that. And you have to break it down. It's not okay to pretend that it's all part of the natural cycle. Why? Because we are claiming credit for this, for the photosynthesis. We're claiming credit for photosynthesis in the ocean, for heaven's sake. How did we do that? Well, we poured all this fertilizer into the ocean, right? And it happened. And it killed a bunch of life by doing that. You don't claim credit for that. Photosynthesis occurs through the grace of nature. That's one of my axioms. Okay, so that's so because we only account for 1.6 and 9.4. 9.4 is the fossil fuel carbon. 1.6 is the net land use carbon. So we are ignoring the 48.6 gigatons of carbon because we are pretending that all this photosynthesis, we did it. Okay. This is the kind of stuff that, as an engineer, I would have never allowed this to happen. I would have demanded that the scientists tell me exactly what is going on there, in the 48.6. Tell me what exactly is causing that emissions. How is it broken down? I know it's from crops. I know it's from animal breathing. I mean, all the cows that we put into the environment, they are eating and they're breathing it out. So I know it's part of that. Okay, but I want to have a complete breakdown there. It's only when we have a complete breakdown of all the emissions that we are doing that we can actually solve the problem accurately. Now I'm doing deductions, I'm saying, okay, some of that is from animal agriculture, and I'm saying, some of that is from chopping down timber. Some of that is from cutting down trees and making paper out of it and then burning that paper. So, but then there is an assumption that every time you plant a tree, it'll grow. What happens when photosynthesis stops? Because you're interfering in that process, right? You're constantly interfering in that process. You're pouring chemicals all over the place, and the chemicals are poisoning the soil. So at some point, it's going to stop. We don't know how, all these systems that are keeping Earth alive, we don't know how those systems will fail if we keep stressing them. This is why the accounting is so important, so that we understand how to intervene to do a lifestyle change for restoring planet Earth.
Thank you. My second part of the question is about bulking up. And people say that the fact that we're producing more carbon is actually good for the planet. I think because they don't use the word bulk, but I think that's what they're saying, that plants
Right.
grow better.
Right.
And so can you talk a little bit more about the bulking up? It seems like scientists can be doing experiments, and you can have trees here with so much carbon and then some other trees without carbon in a contained area and see what's going on.
Right. They've done experiments like that in greenhouses. We know.
Okay.
We know that if you raise the CO2 level within the greenhouse to, say, 600 parts per million, it grows faster. And they do that. Okay. But then we also know that in that greenhouse, if you stay there for a while, you're going to get sick because it's not good for you. Okay. That's what Brittany was talking about the other day, that they have limits on how much CO2 level, how much the CO2 can go up before it's hazardous to your health. Not just us, but all animals, You'll be killing a lot of animals by increasing the CO2 beyond a certain point, because we have evolved with a certain level of CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay. And so for the last 3 million years, it's been between 180 parts per million and 300 parts per million. So our biology is suited for that. If you suddenly double it to 600 parts per million, you're going to die because you haven't been given time to adapt to that. So these conditions have to happen, these changes have to happen slowly. So that's why, I think Brittany was pointing out that there are some countries where the limit is 440 parts per million for indoor CO2, which we are already at 428 outside.
Wow. Yeah.
So when you have a closed room, right, and I mean, you're breathing out CO2, you're converting oxygen to CO2, and you're in there, right? The CO2 level is going to increase unless you have perfect ventilation that would suck it out and bring the fresh air in, right? So it's going to increase. And so that's not much, going from 428 to 440 to make it hazardous for you. But, some countries, they're saying it's 600. And we don't know why some countries are saying 440, some countries saying 600. There may be some thumb being put on the scale to make it easier. I know Brittany may have more to say about that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
So it bulks up. Yeah, the trees do bulk up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Barb.
All right. I've seen in the past probably 2 weeks where all of a sudden soil carbon is they've been doing a few articles on it saying that they thought that they measured it too high in the grasses, not in the grasses. No, in the soil carbon in the soil. Yeah. That they measured it too high. And now they're saying, well, we don't think it really keeps all that carbon, and that it should be a lower amount. And I thought, oh, what's it going to do for all the numbers? But then I looked at the reasoning for it, and it looks like they're saying the same reasoning that they said a long time ago. Like, maybe somebody's going to come along and rip it up and build buildings, so it's not permanent. And just there were a bunch of just the same things that I had read before. So I didn't know if you knew that. Just like in the same about a week or two ago, they started writing again about the carbon that can be stored, and it had to do with soil and I think possibly crops. Did you hear anything at all?
Well, I haven't looked. I mean, I haven't heard recently what the latest research on soil. I haven't been following up on that, but I can show you uh, how it is calculated here. So, see, the vegetation is 450. You see this number here? It
Right.
says vegetation 450, and soils is 1700.
Okay.
Okay, that's what now when they say vegetation, they're talking about above ground vegetation.
Okay.
Okay, it's above ground vegetation. And then they have 1700 for permafrost. I mean, under the permafrost. Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, 1200 on permafrost. Now that 1200 is under the ice. And the ice is melting. So that 1200 is ready to come out as methane or carbon dioxide, if you keep melting it.
Yeah.
So now this 450 is above ground, and 90% of that is in the forested areas of the planet. Okay, on 1/3 of the planet's ice-free land area, 90% of that is there. Okay.
Okay.
Now, of the 1700, 450, approximately the same as above ground, is below ground in root systems. So it's not soil. Of the 1700, 450 is root systems. So that leaves 1250. So 1250 is now in the soil. Now, depending on the depth, so the carbon in the upper layers will go away right away, very quickly, if you deforest like crazy and then start planting grass, because as the root system dies out, it takes the carbon in the soil with it, okay, and it decays. So now when you bring back this, you're going to, so I mean, again, of that, I don't know how much of that is, at high depths, greater depths of the 1250. Okay. All I know is that when I asked the University of Illinois professor that I was working with, how much carbon is sequestered in grazing land, okay, his estimate was 52.8 gigatons. That's 37% of the land area of the planet has only 53 gigatons. That's including above ground and soil put together. That's his estimate, including soil. So it's so depleted in the grazing land. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's further justification for rewilding then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
saying, okay, if it's so depleted, then when you bring back the forest, you will start accumulating carbon in the soil.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
That's why my opportunity cost included all the soil carbon as well in my calculation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Sure. Well, go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, I think you were talking about the 400 versus 600, or something like that, with the numbers. Well, one of them is for legal enforcement limits, and another one's just the recommendation. So with the Canadian one, it's around 440 parts per million, I think, per hour. And that is a recommendation, but when it gets to be around 600, then it's with OSHA, it's a different entity. So Canada is the one that does the 440 is a recommendation, but the OSHA one, I believe, does around, well, they prefer it at 600, but at 625, they will step in because they want it to be at 600. But there's a lot of new research talking about how indoor CO2 levels should try to be as close to that outdoors as much as possible. And I believe that has to do, they don't actually openly admit it. Most of these, I haven't really seen an entity that links the CO2 in the atmosphere to indoor CO2 levels, but I would presume that because the CO2 in the atmosphere keeps rising so much that for being over 400 parts per million is already a lot to handle in a 24-hour period. So it's not like you can really empty your lungs much when you keep getting exposed to higher CO2 levels if the CO2 outdoors that you'd normally go to breathe out the CO2 is high. So they say just research papers, nothing enforceable yet, but they're saying let's just try to have it at an ambient level, and maybe one day the law will change where they're going to say, well, we're going to need to have it at 500 or 450, who knows. But as the CO2 goes up, I can imagine the sick building syndrome is going to probably change in numbers, because they already have a few times just in the last few decades from the 90s, and that wasn't that long ago. The thing about that sick building syndrome is that you don't even need sunlight in order for the CO2 to lead to that heating effect. The sick building syndrome heating is associated not just with the CO2 levels for, breathing in for that toxicity, but also because it traps the heat. People's body heat warms the room, and in a poorly ventilated system, the heat gets to be too much for people to be in. So it doesn't even take that much. You have maybe a few hundred to a little over 1,000, and I think it's around 800 or something, 900, somewhere around there. The body heat is going to, depending on the number of people, is going to be a lot. Now, I get that the Earth is a much bigger space than a building, but I think the same applies where the Earth has temperatures that are, the Earth has heat that it emits regardless of sunlight. So people always think sunlight, but you can have, maybe with enough CO2, the Earth's, own heat from its core might, be trapped and will heat up the planet that way. Because I think there's going to be a time where, they talk about possibly the Venus effect with the air pollution and it clouds the Earth. That's not going to really help for the heating that could come from the planet itself. And they said that it might lead to more volcanic activity because of the trapping of the heat on the surface of the planet that's going to keep heating up the Earth, because the Earth's supposed to, I guess, release the heat to the universe, and it just won't be able to. So there will be more volcanic activity and stuff like that gonna happen in the future.
Yeah, of course, if you keep heating the Earth, you can expect other activities to happen. Thanks, Brittany. Danny?
So we have two more questions in the chat. The first is from Sunny regarding CO2 emissions. What is the latest number, 118% or 130%? Do you have a paper explaining this? If not, do you plan to write it and submit it to journals?
Oh, yeah. No, 118% is for question A. There are two questions, right? The first question is, what is the annual emissions? What is the contribution of animal agriculture to annual emissions? And including the opportunity cost, that becomes 118% today. The second question is, what is the contribution of animal agriculture to the heating we are experiencing today? So which is really about, you're asking a question about the cumulative effect of all the emissions that have happened over the last 10,000 years from human activity. So how much of the human activity, how much of that is caused by animal agriculture? And that is where I said is 130%. And that 130% for the second question B basically says that if you eliminate the animal agriculture industry and you are able to magically restore the original forest that used to be there on the land that's currently being used for animal agriculture, you should see the temperature come down and it actually can cool below what it was in the industrial era. Okay, that's the current estimate. And of course, as you do that, and as I pointed out, that the trees are going to not bulk up anymore as the CO2 levels decrease, and eventually it'll reach that equilibrium.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from Michael. As for cows and methane production, what are your thoughts on a middle ground intervention to drastically reduce methane production with the use of red seaweed, setting up incentives to encourage farmers, ranchers, and others to incorporate that in cows' diet? I recognize that the cows would still live and die in awful conditions and treated as units of production. But
Right.
would such an initiative be a net positive for now?
Well, I would support something like that if it is accompanied by a strict prohibition of any further impregnation of cows. Okay, no more. You're done. No more. So as part of this process of transitioning from an animal-based economy to a plant-based economy, if you were to do that, bring seaweed to feed cows and whatnot, I'm okay with it. But if you're still impregnating cows, you're still bringing them into the world, and then you're giving them seaweed, that's like urinating on a fire. It's useless stuff. So you have to agree to do a transformation, and then as part of that, if you do this, I'm okay with it, right? But the reason I'm saying we can get serious about the transformation itself, that we are going towards a plant-based economy, not just for climate change, for all the other reasons I pointed out. But if we are just doing this, and in order to pretend that the methane emissions are less and therefore we can continue doing this, then you're ignoring 6 of the 7 transgressions. Even climate change, you're pretending it is, um, it is the only thing that we need to worry about. Okay, so it's the same old story. I'm sick of it. We are done with that story. I mean, look, we are seeing the consequences of clinging to the system. I mean, the people are seriously talking about nuclear war. Nuclear war over a melting Arctic. Is that what we want? Assume that the Arctic is going to melt and then go fight nuclear wars to figure out who's going to control the lanes, the shipping lanes there? Or do you want to refreeze the Arctic? You want a project that refreezes the Arctic. Okay?
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's the transformation I'm talking about.
And there's one follow-up question from Michael, and then we can move on. Under what circumstances can we have them agree to that unless they're paid for each cow they choose not to impregnate? Any other way to incentivize them?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to pay them for each cow they don't impregnate, and then give them incentives to go reforest on that land. Okay, so it has to be comprehensive. Look, right now, who is initiating this nuclear war to right? They're clinging to the system. They're lying about the food. They're putting a food pyramid that's got cows in them. I mean, it's completely anti-science, and they're no longer participating in the UN process. I mean, so who's doing this? Okay, now how do we get them to change? I don't know. But others have to say, we are sick and tired of it. We are no longer going to buy into this American way of life is the only way of life. There are other ways to live. So the American way of life is not negotiable, is how the UN got into the mess that it's in right now. And I have to say, the American way of life is highly negotiable. You do not negotiate with nature. Nature is the boss. That's engineering 101. Okay. You don't solve problems by fighting nature. So, and which means the other countries have to start doing this. They have to say, okay, we're not going to buy this crazy fellow and instigating wars all over the place. We have to create a serious project for refreezing the Arctic.
Thank you.
Yeah, either we create a serious project for refreezing the Arctic, or you're going to be in a nuclear war over Arctic shipping lanes, and we are all going to die. I don't mind. Look, I'm 60 odd years old, As I told you, I've lived my life. But I'm trying to tell you guys there is a way out, and we need to convince the reasonable people in the world that there is a way out. And it's not about figuring out how to, finesse the numbers so that you can continue doing what we're doing. So it has to be part of a process of honestly trying to transform. And if it requires us to pay people to do this, fine, let's do that. I mean, they're printing money, and they're giving it to the bankers right now. Okay. So it's deploying our resources for the right purpose.
Next up, we have Barb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say kind of quickly, right before you gave your marvelous answer about the cows, I was thinking about the red seaweed, and first of all, the cows, a lot of them don't really like it. They don't have that much success with it, and then but they just keep throwing it out there as like, well, we could do this. But then the other thing about that is that I believe they have to take that seaweed from somewhere. And so they're going to be, having little factory farm seaweed that they're going to be collecting from the oceans, and they're just going to mess up the oceans more. So this is kind of like Planet A, where every time they try to do something to keep animal agriculture going, they're messing up another area.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so I like the way you answered everything, Sailesh, at the end, where you're just getting like, we've got to do this and we've got to do this now. We've got to,
Right.
yeah. So anyway,
So,
that's
I mean,
it.
it's all about preserving colonialism, okay, and just doubling down on colonialism. And so, why would you want to do that? Whether you're part of the colonized or the colonizer, whatever your identity is, we've all been suffering, right? So, the colonized have been suffering from hunger. Colonizers have been suffering from obesity, you know, and it's the same. It's a system that's exploiting all of us. Yeah. The common ground is suffering 100%. Michael is right. Basically, we've all been suffering from this system. So why the heck are we going to such great lengths to preserve this damn thing? Right? Let's figure out a system that works. And it's a lot of fun to work on a new system that works for everybody. Right? And it has to be based on sound engineering principles. Yeah. Brittany, you have the last word.
Oh wow, that's intense pressure, but I'll be able to handle it. I've been on this planet long enough with all the CO2 building up. Anyway, so my question's about the deserts, since you were bringing it up in your chapter. I was kind of wondering, should we, let's say that there's deserts that are native, that are already deserts.
Mhm.
where they've always been deserts on their own. Should we green them anyway because that would increase the CO2 sinking, or should we leave them as is? And then, because I think it's very hard to understand what is an actual desert and what isn't, because I heard that wherever deserts are, typically there was animal agriculture there.
Right.
With the Sahara, some of these countries have most of their deforestation, desertification due to animal agriculture with the overgrazing, and they say it goes from Morocco all the way to China
Right.
because of what's happened in, since the dawn of since the dawn of agriculture. So it's
Right.
very hard to know what a desert is, but say those were like deserts long before it. Should we green those or probably focus on the transformation? Well, not like transformation. Focus on whatever's freed up from animal agriculture for its land to just rewild that first.
Yeah, we have to rewild the animal. I'm suggesting rewild the animal agriculture land first. And you don't have to worry about the deserts at the moment, because that's 19% of the land area of the planet, deserts and mountains, right? And some of that got deforested and turned into deserts through animal agriculture. In fact, you can see the process happening today. You know, like I see this in Rajasthan. People are, they deforest and then they grow cows. And then once they cannot raise cows on that land, and they bring the goats. And once the goats are finished, I mean, it's desert, because the goats even eat the roots. So that nothing new grows by the time they're finished. So, um, so we see the desertification process is also caused by animal agriculture, and that has been also acknowledged. There's a UN Convention to Combat Desertification that is acknowledging that. But anyway, we don't have to go there right now. If we just restore the forests on the land that's currently being used for animal agriculture, I think that's the first step I would say we have to take. And then we can evaluate. We can look at the 7 planetary boundaries, see how the boundaries are responding to this intervention. And based on that, we have the option to go green the deserts if necessary. Right? So you have that in your back pocket to do more if necessary. Typically, I mean, I know some engineers who tell me that we have to go a lot the other way, right? So like we have increased it by 3 watts per square meter. So some engineers are suggesting that we need to decrease it to minus 0.5 watts per square meter in order to quickly cool the earth, and then we can stabilize it. Yeah.
I think if I was to take a route for which way to go artificially, probably wouldn't be to green the deserts, because I know about the albedo effect. I know that places where there's a lot of ice are considered deserts, and if you put trees there, then it could mess up the albedo effect, and then you can end up with more heating. I think regular sand deserts kind of do that too. Plus, they have the chaparral, and if they're untouched, then they are acting as CO2 sinks in a way. Probably have to look more into it. So for me, I would imagine if I was to go about doing some artificial CO2 decreasing, it would be probably doing seasteading, where it would be massive amounts of microalgae and seaweed and all that out in the middle of the desert, out in the middle of the ocean, which is kind of like a desert, but much deeper, much bigger. So you could probably do a whole lot more there. What do you think? Do you think that's a better route?
No, I would say even if you need to cool the earth more, I wouldn't do it with this. I would temporarily just do marine cloud brightening. Just basically take seawater and turn it into a fine mist and send it up there to create clouds that brighten. So you reflect the sunlight back, and that's how I would start cooling the Arctic first, right away. That's what I would do if you have to cool it right away. Okay. But first step is just, take it seriously and get everybody to go vegan as quickly as possible. And stop pretending that our eating of animals is a minor consequence. It's not a minor consequence. You're even causing nuclear war to happen, okay? So don't even think of telling me that it's minor stuff. People are already talking about nuclear war over this. Yeah. Anyway.
I kind of worry about the cloud seeding with the weather manipulation, something going wrong. I was thinking some sort of vertical farming down into the ocean as buoys, but I don't know. Do you think that's an okay idea, or do you think I'm off the rails on that one?
I haven't looked into it, Brittany, to be honest with you, but marine cloud brightening, I'm okay with it because it's happening in the Arctic area where anyway, we wanted to cool it directly there, and you can stop it anytime because as soon as you stop misting the seawater, it goes away.
I'll send you an email if that's okay, because I do worry about sometimes aerosols staying in the atmosphere. But you're okay with an email, right?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Okay. Talk to you all soon. Please come back tomorrow and we'll continue the discussion.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
The house is burning, but we're still sitting in the glow. Phones charged, lights on, pretending we don't know. But the forest is silent, the river's running low, and the flame on our plates is the strongest fire we throw. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. 7 boundaries broken, the earth pushed past the line. Climate, land, species, fresh water, chemicals, nutrients, oceans in decline. Not danger, disaster in real time. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Metafoodians rise, this is your power. And here in India, one truth stands the same. Milk is not just milk, dairy feeds the flame. Cows and methane, fields and forests turn to grain. Politics, culture, carbon, all wired to the same chain. Every cup of curd is heat in the air. Every block of butter is a forest repair. It's not a small habit, it's a planetary affair. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is our hour. Energy fixes half the hurt, Dr. Rao made that clear. But food fixes the other half, the half that's burning here. Change the plate, change the land, change the future's atmosphere. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Metafoodians unite, this is your choir. Every millet, every fruit, every sapseed, every bean is water on the wildfire of a world we've never seen. Every oil-free bite is a river turning clean. This is not perfection, it's direction. Not pressure, but protection. A week of choices can cool a generation. A company's courage can ignite a nation. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Seekers and rise, this is your hour. Metafoodians unite, Metafoodians ignite, sharing love in the meta zone, light